In the history of philosophy, few thinkers challenge common sense as radically as George Berkeley, while most philosophers believe that the physical world exists independently of the human mind. Berkeley proposed a startling idea. Matter does not exist outside perception. According to him, reality is fundamentally mental or spiritual. Berkeley was an 18th century Irish philosopher and bishop who developed one of the most influential forms of idealism, known as Immaterialism. He argued against material substance and claimed that everything we know exists only as idea perceived by mind. His philosophy was not meant to deny reality, but rather to defend certainty, religion, and the existence of God against skepticism and atheism. Berkeley believed that philosophers before him, especially John Locke, had unintentionally created skepticism by separating the world into material substance and mental ideas. Berkeley sought to remove this confusion by declaring that only mind and ideas truly exist. His philosophy revolved around famous doctrines such as the rejection of primary and secondary qualities, the critique of abstract ideas, the principle Esse Est Percipi, the role of God as the eternal perceiver of the universe. Berkeley began his criticism with Locke's distinction between primary qualities and secondary qualities. According to Locke, primary qualities such as shape, size, motion, number, and solidity exist objectively in material objects themselves. Secondary qualities such as color, taste, smell, heat, and sound exist only in the perceiving mind because they depend on sensation. For example, Locke argued that a red apple possesses shape and extension objectively, but its redness exists only as a sensation in our mind. Berkeley challenged the distinction completely. He argued that both primary and secondary qualities are equally dependent on perception. We never experience shape without color, extension without sensation, or motion without observation. All qualities are experienced together through the senses. Take the example of motion. A moving object may appear fast to one observer and slow to another. Similarly, size appears different depending on distance. A tower seen from far away looks small, but from nearby it appears large. If secondary qualities are subjective because they vary with perception, then primary qualities must also be subjective for the same reason. Berkeley concludes that there is no meaningful distinction between primary and secondary qualities. Both exist only as ideas in the mind. Thus, the motion of a material substance exists independently of perception, become unnecessary and meaningless. From this critique, Berkeley developed his famous doctrine of immaterialism. Immaterialism is the theory that material substance does not exist. According to Berkeley, reality consists only of mind or spirit that perceive, ideas that are perceived. What we call physical objects are merely collection of ideas perceived through the senses. For Berkeley, when we say tree, we are referring not to a material object existing independently in space, but to a bundle of sensory ideas, colors, textures, smell, shape, and so on, perceived by the mind. He argued that we can never know a material substance beyond perception. Every object we experience is simply an idea in consciousness. Since matter can never be experienced apart from ideas, belief in matter is unnecessary. Berkeley believed philosophers invented material substance as an abstract support behind qualities, but such a support can never be perceived. Therefore, it should not be accepted. This does not mean Berkeley denied the existence of the world. Rather, he denied that the world exists materially. The world is real because ideas are real and they are experienced directly. Reality, therefore, is spiritual and mental, not material. Another major target of Berkeley's philosophy was the theory of abstract ideas. Philosophers like Locke claimed that the mind can form abstract concepts by separating common feature from particular object. For example, the general idea of triangles supposedly represents all triangles without being any specific kind of triangle. Berkeley argued that such abstract ideas are impossible. According to him, whenever we imagine a triangle, we imagine a particular triangle, either large or small, equilateral or scalene, color or colorless. We can never imagine a completely abstract triangle that possesses no specific characteristic. Similarly, we cannot imagine humanity apart from particular human. Berkeley believed abstract ideas are merely worlds without corresponding mental image. Philosophers are misled by language into thinking such abstraction exists independently. This critique was central to his philosophy because the idea of material substance itself was an abstract idea. Since no one can perceive matter apart from specific sensation, the concept of matter is meaningless. Berkeley wanted philosophy to remain grounded in direct experience rather than empty abstraction. Berkeley's most famous principle is the Latin phrase, Esse Est Percipi. To be is to be perceived. According to Berkeley, the existence of sensible objects consists entirely in their being perceived by a human mind. A chair exists because it is seen, touch or experience. A flower exists because it is perceived through sight and smell. Remove all perception and the object ceases to exist as a sensible thing. Berkeley argued that it is impossible to conceive of an object existence unperceived because the very act of conceiving it means it is being perceived by the mind. For example, imagine a tree standing alone in a forest with no one observing it. Berkeley would argue that the moment you imagine that tree, it is already being perceived in your mind. Therefore, an unperceived object is inconceivable. This doctrine directly opposes materialism, which claims objects exist independently of observers. However, Berkeley did not mean that objects disappear whenever humans stop looking at them. Instead, he believed that all things continue to exist because they are eternally perceived by God. One of the most criticisms of Berkeley's philosophy is that it seemed to lead to Solipsism. Solipsism is the view that only one own mind exists, while everything else may be illusion. Critics argue that if reality consists only of idea in the mind, then how can we know other mind or an external world truly exist? Berkeley strongly rejects solipsism. He argued that many of our sensory experiences are not under our control. We cannot choose whether the sun rises, whether fire burns, and whether storm occurs. Those ideas arrive in our mind with order, consistency, and power independent of our will. Therefore, this perception must originate from another spirit greater than ourselves. Berkeley concludes that the orderly world we experience is produced by God, not by our individual mind. The regulatory of nature reflects the activity of a divine spirit, communicating ideas to human beings. Thus, Berkeley believed his philosophy actually defeats skepticism rather than creating it. Since we directly perceive ideas themselves, there is no gap between appearance and reality. God plays a central role in Berkeley's philosophy. Since object cannot be exist unperceived, there must be an eternal perceiver who continuously sustains the world even when finite humans are absent. That eternal perceiver is God. According to Berkeley, God constantly perceives all things, granting the continued existence and order of the universe. Nature itself is like a language through which God communicates with humanity. For Berkeley, the laws of nature are not mechanical force existence in matter, but a regular pattern established by divine will. Alongside God, Berkeley also affirms the existence of the self. Although ideas are passive, the mind or spirit is active. The self perceives, wills, imagine and think. Unlike ideas, the self cannot itself be perceived as an object. Instead, we know the self through inward awareness and activity. Thus, Berkeley's universe contains finite spirit or human mind, infinite spirit or God, ideas perceived by mind. There is no place for material substance in this system. George Berkeley developed one of the boldest philosophies in modern thought by rejecting the distinction between primary and secondary qualities, criticizing abstract ideas, and denying the existence of material substance. He constructed a complete philosophy of immaterialism. His famous principle, Esse Est Percipi, transformed the understanding of reality by claiming that existence depends upon perception. Although critics accuse him of leading philosophy towards Solipsism, Berkeley defends the reality of the external world through the constant perception of God. For Berkeley, reality is not made of lifeless matter, but of minds, ideas, and divine activity. His philosophy challenged assumptions about the nature of existence and influenced later thinkers such as David Hume and Immanuel Kant. Even today, Berkeley's ideas continue to provoke deep philosophical questions. What does it mean for something to exist? Can matter exist independently of consciousness? And its reality ultimately mental rather than material? If you are still watching, I hope you are finding this content useful. Please like and share this video, subscribe to the channel and share your thought in the comment. Your support motivates me to create even more content like this.